Hey everybody, welcome. I'm Lee Camp, joined by Eleanor Goldfield.
Hello, hello.
And this is the show where we talk censored stories and people, sensible solutions, and common ground movements to fight and build.
And sometimes other stuff.
And we are on the cusp of the main event. Let's get ready to rumble. Oh, God.
The amount of excitement that you have, like, so vastly outweighs mine that...
I'm not excited for tomorrow. I'm, like, horrified. There's a difference.
Can I be absolutely honest and say that I'm meh? Here's the thing. I'm horrified at the situation, but the situation exists outside of the election. Well, and first of all, election should really be in quotes because elections are something other people do, not the United States.
Then let's just call it the erection. So the erection tomorrow. Go ahead.
We're erecting a new pedestal to capitalism and to old crotchety, sexist, racist white dudes.
Well, and we should call it the erection because what happens tomorrow is going to be hard, and we're going to all get fucked.
Potentially blood-filled.
Ooh. Had to take that to a dark place.
Hey, that's what erections are. Kids, gather round, and we're going to talk some Anatomy 101.
I interrupt you. You were saying you're not excited.
Speaking of erections, no, I'm not excited. Yeah, because the shittiness exists around the elections. The elections are just like, it's just like this giant... It's like taking a giant shit inside of, a prison cell. It's like, well, that sucks, but the prison cell is in and of itself the problem. What we need is to abolish that prison cell in its entirety. So the structure of this system in its entirety is awful, and that is what needs to be addressed. The election is that turd in the middle of the room where you're like, I guess we have to deal with this. But this is not the main problem. This is not the larger issue at hand.
It's it's Plato's cave. We're seeing the shadow. We're all focusing on the shadows on the wall,
right?
And
right.
We're still chained to the bottom of the cave.
So yeah, I mean, I am concerned on the community level, particularly here in DC. I'm organizing around keeping people safe and making sure that people are as safe as they can be in a situation like this, and have ways to connect with people in order to get supplies and aid if need be.
Can I give
That's
a little
where that's where my concern is.
Can I give a little background? I know you're going to get into how to keep people safe and stuff. I just wanted to, because people may be like, there's a certain number of people that listening right now that might be like, safe from what? What are you talking about? So down. It's
a good question, to be honest.
Well, no, it is a good question. Downtown DC is already looking like a war zone as of last when I was. So the offices where we film Redacted at Night are 2 blocks from the White House, and everything's boarded up. Now it looks the same as the beginning of the pandemic, but so either one's a dystopian, fucking present. But everything's boarded up. I'm sure everything will be closed most of tomorrow. And they're preparing, we've already seen cops on most corners. They've amped up the militarization of this city. And I imagine a lot of cities, probably mostly in battleground states, but probably others as well. They're ramping up this militarization. They're putting more cops out there. All the cops that could possibly ever be on duty will be on duty. And, who knows how many will be dressed like stormtroopers, as they like to do. So that is what you meant by keeping people safe. There could be very large-scale protests.
Well, I mean, there's concerns outside of that, right? There's a lot of concerns about people coming into Washington, D.C., or people being activated inside of Washington, D.C., who are fascists, white supremacists, white militias that will target marginalized and at-risk groups. So this is another concern. It's not just that's why I said, like, the question from who, keep us safe from what, like, is actually a good question, because it's not one thing. And although my friend recently said when he was asking me this question, I was like, well, like the state and fascists and white supremacists, and he's like, you just said the same thing 3 times.
Oh my God, tell him about the Spider-Man meme.
Oh, there's this amazing It's this amazing image that I found that it has this reporter, and she's holding up her, her little, what is it called? Microphone. Thank you. She's holding
dildo.
It's been a long day already. She's holding up her microphone to a man and saying, "So where are the police when the neo-Nazis show up?" And the guy goes, "Well, where's Peter Parker when Spider-Man appears?"
I love that.
And yeah, that's... Yes. So there's absolutely that point. But it's also important to note that like not all assholes wear uniforms. So there are like I'm just going to start quoting a bunch of shit. Like in the Addams Family film where they're like, "Oh, Wednesday, what are you dressed up as?" And she's like, "I'm a homicidal maniac. They look just like everyone else."
Right.
Sometimes white supremacists look like everyone else. They don't always come dressed in a cop uniform. So these are concerns that folks are aware of and are working to to set up basically like parameters, protocols, and systems that allow us to interact with our neighbors, that allow us to keep each other safe and protected, regardless of what happens. If nothing happens, great. Then we have these systems in place for anything, ranging from like a Halloween party to a to an all-out state assault. But it's good to have these networks set up. So that's what we've been doing, and ensuring that people have access to what they need, and including the ability to stay safe. So
now some people are claiming they're going to, I don't know, protest or large-scale marches and things like that. If Trump wins, they're just going to get furious. And here's the thing: is like I don't like how ridiculous our electoral system is. I don't like the voter suppression. I talk a lot about how many people have been purged from the rolls. So I can understand being upset if Trump wins. But here's the thing is like, if he legit wins, if they're like, yeah, we just counted all the votes and he fucking won, then there's not really the protests don't make sense. What would make sense to me because if he won, he fucking won. He won by being a twat bag, but he still won. What would make sense for me is if and again, I said this. I did videos on the polling and everything a couple of days ago at my Moment of Clarity YouTube channel, and it's not that I'm a fan of Biden, and you and I will probably talk more about in this episode how similar they are and how they're both part of the oligarchy and they're both part of the oppression. So it's not about being a fan of Biden, but I am a fan of the whatever remains of our fading democratic system. And so I would understand protests far more readily that get furious and take the streets if Biden basically is winning in the counts and Trump just comes out and announces he won, which is what he will do. He will almost definitely announce Tuesday night that he has won, no matter what we see, unless it is such a large-scale Biden
landslide.
Jesus, landslide.
It's all right. We're all on the struggle bus.
We're all on the struggle bus. We're all too angry and tired to say things clearly. But also, I think with a Biden win, it should be called, instead of a landslide, kick to the balls. If there's extreme Biden kick to the balls, then as opposed to a Trump kick to the balls, then that is maybe the one scenario where Trump doesn't declare victory, but chances are no matter what, he's going to declare victory. So then what will people do? What will the governments in these states do? That's a giant question mark, which we're going to save some of this for our live stream tomorrow because that's when we'll know more as to what's been happening. We have a live stream tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, youtube.com/Moment of Clarity. We'll be going through what happened during the course of the day, but in a deeper, more substantive way than your garbage mainstream media. So,
well, not just in a more substantive way, in just a substantive way, full stop. It's
because there is no substantive way
right.
of coverage on the mainstream.
There was something I was going to say about what you just said, and then I lost it.
That Trump will declare victory no matter what, and that Biden and Trump are both part of an oppressive force that is destroying
true.
our world and our environment.
Amen. Amen, sister. Yes, perhaps it was that I agree. I mean, I don't know what's gonna. Yeah, it's hard to say what I think Trump will do. I do agree with you that that he is an arrogant dick who would love to say it's mine, it's all mine. But I think
he's already declared himself the winner.
I think so. Here's and yes, we'll talk more about this tomorrow. But the bottom line is something that, Jackie Lookman, who's the co-host of By Any Means Necessary on Sputnik Radio, I sat down with her for the last episode of the Deception 2020 series, which I put out, which Lee is also a part of. And you can...
I don't mean to brag, but I was probably the fourth best interview of the Deception 2020.
Stop. You were... I'm not going to say because that would be biased. But yeah, so those are all over at artkillingapathy.com. But something that Jackie said in the one that was released today is that the struggle remains the same. And for folks on the street and for folks who are the most affected by government policies and the government structure as it stands, no matter what happens tomorrow in terms of this quote-unquote election, this vastly and vehemently undemocratic institution that we call our election system, no matter what happens with that shitstorm, the reality on the streets and for people will be the same. So again, it's not that I'm saying ignore the pile of shit in the middle of the prison cell, but don't ignore the fact that we're in a prison cell here. Don't ignore the fact that, as Eugene Purrier mentioned, which is another person I interviewed for this series, don't ignore the fact that the problem is that we've been shoved into this cul-de-sac with only two choices and no exit. That is where they've put us. And our job is not to say, oh, cool, I guess I'll just stay here and sit here nicely and quietly and let you destroy my future, my present, my ability to survive and thrive. Our job is to find an exit out of this shitty cul-de-sac that doesn't involve either of the two main parties. So that's really... And I'm not trying to diminish, and I talked about this in my other podcast, Act Out. I'm not trying to diminish anybody's fears or anybody's anxiety. I think that that's very real right now. It's why I'm having a hard time completing a full sentence, because there's just been a lot of organizing and a lot of stress and sure, a lot of worry about the ramifications of this quote-unquote election. But again, the election in and of itself is not the main... It's not the main point here. It is not the main character in this play, in this twisted tragic comedy that is the United States. So just throwing that out there to highlight that, to remind folks that, come Wednesday, come Thursday, come next month, next year, the struggle remains the same, and the struggle happens far outside the confines of any voting booth.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, I mean, I have a tough time analyzing all of this shit show right now, because I feel like whatever the fuck happens, whether you have a Trump win, a Biden win, or just all-out chaos, kind of nothing in terms of analysis will be the same in the days after. In terms of that stuff, the deeper analysis, the deeper forms of oppression, that will all be the same, absolutely. And you and I talk more about that than I'd say the entirety of all mainstream media and corporate media. And so that is something that's very important, is that so much of our world will not change depending on who gets the presidential office, and I that can't be said enough. So for those of you listening to this, either Tuesday night or even going farther into the week, Wednesday, Thursday, where you'll be happy, because we're about to move on past at least this topic. But for those of you listening to this before Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, we will be doing a live stream, which is tomorrow, Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern at youtube.com/moment of clarity. We'll be doing it for 1 hour roughly, and it's, youtube.com/moment of clarity. So please join us there. We'll have, some analysis on what it seems like's been happening during the day in terms of voting, but we'll also have a bunch of other analysis about this election in general. And we'd love for you to join us there. For those of you who haven't joined our live streams before, we answer your questions, talk about your topics, and can see your comments live as we do it. So
and we'll be sharing some important time together to grieve, to
hold hands,
to shriek at the screen together. Yeah. It'll be good times.
Yes, absolutely good times. YouTube.com/moment of clarity. Write it down right now. Get out your pencil. Get it. It's within reach. I can see it. It's reach.
Pencil.
Or pen. And write down 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Okay, so a couple other quick things before we get to another topic. Eleanor's movie is at hardroadofhope.com, and my comedy specials at leecampamerican.com. This show has no sponsors or ads of any kind except for our own work, and you guys support this show. You make it possible, and you do that at patreon.com/commoncensored. For all you who are members, thank you so much. Honestly, this podcast has been going for like a year and a half or something, and we couldn't do it without you. So that's patreon.com/commoncensored. All right, let's move on to, and we have all kinds of web videos that we've been putting up that you should also check out. Eleanor has just put out an awesome series, Deception 2020, and that's at artkillingapathy.com. And I've been doing web exclusives as well at youtube.com/moment of clarity. Okay, let's move on to another topic that may or may not mention Joe Biden at some point, but that does not mean if you're listening to this after the election, don't worry. This is about far more than that. Glenn Greenwald has left The Intercept. Most of you probably know that, but maybe you haven't been paying attention to the details of this story. It's really pretty fascinating and actually goes deeper than just Glenn Greenwald. So Glenn Greenwald, famous author, famous writer, journalist. He's the one who brought out the Snowden files, worked with Edward Snowden to release them. And since that time, co-founded The Intercept. The Intercept is funded by a billionaire, creator of eBay, Pierre Omidyar. And many have questioned as to what goes on there because it's at times The Intercept will do wonderful reporting that seems very adversarial to our American empire and far more impressive than your corporate media. Mm-hmm. So there are many times on Redacted Tonight that I quote from The Intercept, sometimes Glenn Greenwald, sometimes other authors there. But at the same time, The Intercept seems to have a lot of issues that have gotten worse and worse.
Yeah, I was just gonna say there seems to be like a bit of a creep there, like a slow creep. Whereas 4 or 5 years ago, it's almost like The Intercept could do no wrong. Like I remember looking at their stuff constantly and being like, God damn, these are some amazing investigative journalism. This is some amazing investigative journalism, and they just really seem to be at the peak. Scahill before that came out with Dirty Wars, and it was just seemed like, wow, what a powerhouse to really go up against the U.S. empire. And they just slowly but surely. It's
been eroded. Yeah, it's pretty crazy to see. And you mentioned Scahill. When The Intercept started, the three names that caught my attention because they were three of my favorite journalists, authors, ever, were Glenn Greenwald, revealing the Snowden files, Jeremy Scahill, who I was friendly with back when I lived in New York. He came to several of my comedy shows, and he also had wrote incredible best-selling books like Dirty Wars about Blackwater. He really revealed Blackwater when people didn't even know what it was, how the U.S. was using mercenary forces that are completely unaccountable, basically, to our government, which is, that's signs of a dictatorship or a completely non-transparent government, which is the opposite of what ours is supposed to be. But we know it is that. It is not transparent in so many ways. So he was doing incredible work. And then there was Matt Taibbi, who never ultimately ended up working with The Intercept, but he was one of the earliest. He was going to co-found a satire site or a kind of comedic investigative journalism, I think is maybe how they would define it. And Taibbi's one of my favorite writers as well. Now, many of people may know him now as the co-host of Useful Idiots for the Rolling Stone Network, but great author, writes amazing books, still doing wonderful work. Glenn Greenwald still doing wonderful work. Scahill, I'll get to in a minute. But what is fascinating, before I even get into Greenwald's reasoning for resigning, what was fascinating to me, and I've seen some coverage of this in Mint Press news, but there really has not been very much, is that The Intercept seems like an entity designed to capture those doing impressive work against the kind of like American business community or the American empire. Captured be a bit extreme word for what they did to Glenn Greenwald, because Glenn was still doing wonderful work. I mean, even at The Intercept, Glenn was revealing the crimes of the Brazilian government that got Lula out of prison. I mean, doing awesome stuff. But my one criticism of Greenwald is that something like 95 or 97% of the Snowden files have never been released. The Intercept in the earlier days did amazing work revealing what was in the Snowden files, but then it slowly stopped. And then Greenwald announced it wasn't going forward anymore, and Snowden's never spoken on it. And Laura Poitras, who was the other person involved in it, was furious and wrote things about how she was not consulted and she's livid.
It always seemed so odd to me that Snowden didn't comment on it. Yeah, or Greenwald either. It just seemed odd that everyone was just kind of like.
Well, Greenwald did comment on it, but it didn't explain it to me. He said there's not enough money to do the research,
which is a bullshit response.
It takes immense research.
Because there is.
I agree. So I have no idea, but they basically, for whatever reason, whether Greenwald's being legit or not on that front, they captured the Snowden files. The Snowden files are held by basically The Intercept and almost no one else, and they are not releasing them. So that's one capture. Another one is Jeremy Scahill, who, like I said, I'm a huge fan of, but now he does a fairly standard podcast for The Intercept. It's nothing that impressive, and he puts out, one episode a week maybe. So compare that to his kind of like gut-wrenching, government-changing, worldview-changing books like Dirty Wars, and it's just there's no competition. Now, I don't know if that's something with him personally. Maybe he got burnt out and he was like, I can't do it anymore. Who knows? But whatever the reason, they kind of captured Jeremy Scahill and got him to relatively shut up other than a weekly podcast. Naomi Klein went from this impressive, doing impressive work. I mean, her earliest work that really put her on the map, No Logo, is a very anti-corporate book. Even as far forward as This Changes Everything is still a fairly anti-capitalism book about climate change, saying you can't have capitalism and act like it's going to fix climate change.
Shock doctrine was very instrumental in my growth as a radical. Yeah,
so now Naomi Klein has, I don't know whether she's still doing good work. I don't follow everything she does, but she's very defensive of, people like Bill McKibben who, yes, divest from fossil fuels, but then reinvest in these other horrible companies. McKibben has done a lot of bad stuff recently on that front. It was covered most recently by The Gray Zone. Max Blumenthal dug into it and kind of revealed all that. And for some odd reason, Naomi Klein just defends these large capitalist green entities as if they're going to be the answer. And she most recently attacked Greenwald for his resignation. So
which just really that in and of itself has made me kind of side-eye Naomi Klein. And I understand, even before that, you had mentioned to me, what was it, like when Planet of the Humans?
Yeah, Planet of the Humans.
She had basically come out in support, as you just said.
She was one of the main ones, yeah.
Right, of Bill McKibben and all of this stuff, and then she's also
said Michael Moore's movie should be like removed from the internet and stuff.
right, and we had this conversation back then, like, wait, what? I thought that she'd also hated Big Green and yeah, and it just especially this like attack on Glenn Greenwald. It's like even if you like disagree with Glenn's choice, what about his commentary is wrong? And I guess we're gonna get into like his specific reasons for
Yeah, let's do that right now. I just wanted to conclude.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead.
No, that's fine. Because I'm leaving it out for too long. I didn't mean to put it off this long. But to conclude that point, I just feel like the Intercept on so many occasions, and we haven't even listed them all. I don't know everybody who works there or anything, so there might be more, but has succeeded in kind of capturing these very impressive, powerful journalists and paying them like, hundreds of thousands of dollars to either do like one article a month or to like, do a podcast that is not that impressive. Like, and so it's not that they're necessarily, it's not like Jeremy Scahill has changed all his views, but he's just like, it's like compared to what he was doing. He's quieted down. And so it's in a way, the Intercept has been very useful in shutting up a lot of adversarial press. And then, of course, they've done a terrible job of leaking whistleblowers' identities as well.
Oh, my God.
So there's that as well. But anyway, we can talk more about that, but let me get into, to tell people why Glenn Greenwald said he was resigning. And he's the co-founder. He's not just a writer for The Intercept. He's the co-founder of The Intercept. He said that they tried to edit, and he said he has a statement in it or whatever, a clause in his contract that says they cannot edit his pieces. And yet the editors in New York said they would not publish his article on the Joe Biden and the Hunter Biden emails that have come out recently. I assume most of what he was talking about was probably the media's response to it. And I actually want to talk more about that in a few minutes as well. But and he said, this was finally a step too far, that they wanted to edit out anything that was, harmful to Joe Biden, and he hadn't been edited before in that way. And he ultimately decided he couldn't put up with it anymore. Now, he does say in his resignation that he was thinking of leaving before this. Mm-hmm. He was having conversations with people about starting a new organization and stuff like that. So it's not that, because I think some people want to say like, oh, that's bullshit about the Biden thing. He just wants Substack readers because he's trying to sell his Substack subscriptions.
Legit, also have no idea what Substack is.
Oh,
a side note.
I use Substack. I'm glad you enjoy my Substack. Jeez.
Well, it's like when somebody sends me like a Reddit page, and I'm like, nope, not even going to bother opening that because I don't understand.
You just alienated yourself to all the nerds who listen to this.
I'm a nerd in other ways. I can still align a tape machine.
Aaron Schwartz.
I do.
Co-started Reddit.
No, let me just say,
I'm just trying to cover for you here because I feel like a lot of people are really upset right now.
I have a lot of love for Reddit. I have a lot of love for a lot of things I don't understand.
Okay.
Like
me, you don't seem to have a fucking clue what I'm talking about.
Aaron Schwartz also came up, or helped, co-found the concept of Creative Commons. I love that Creative Commons exists. I don't understand how it works, but I love it. I think it's great. So yeah, I mean, but also I have no idea what Substack is. So, I just felt that.
Fair enough. It's a email. A lot of people use it for subscription, although mine's free. Hey, folks, join my Substack.
See, I was just giving you space to promote your Substack.
Yeah, right. It's called Lee Camp Ledger, but this shows how little I know. I don't actually know what website you would find that at, but I bet if you go to Substack and look up Lee Camp or Lee Camp Ledger, you'll probably find it. Anyway.
Sorry. Carry on.
Anyway, Greenwald responded to this idea that he was just doing it to get subscribers by saying, like, you don't leave The Intercept for money. Mm-hmm. You stay at The Intercept for money because The Intercept pays people crazy amounts of money to do almost nothing. So he's like, the idea that I left for money is like hilarious. Anyway, they tried to edit him in that way. He had other grievances, which is why he was looking into leaving. He said they were raising money off his name, which makes sense. He's a co-founder, but at the same time, they would allow things like the Reality Winner catastrophe to be hung around his neck when he had nothing to do with it. Reality Winner was the whistleblower that was revealed by the Intercept because they sent her documents to the CIA and said, are these legit? And the CIA
easily see who printed out the documents, being like, well, hold that thought.
Yeah, and immediately arrested her. So she's in prison right now. And Greenwald says in his resignation that he knew nothing about anything about that those revelations or that article with Reality Winner until basically it was too late, until like an hour before it went live or whatever, and he had no idea that they had faxed it over to the CIA.
Oh, God.
But so he does his resignation. He leaves the Intercept. Many people are coming after him, and I think this also says a lot about the media as a whole and the way the Intercept has slowly been, whether it was a capturing device from the beginning when it was founded, which Glenn Greenwald didn't know about and was kind of a useful idiot on that front, or whether it has slowly been eroded to the position it's in now. And by the way, they have a bunch of other journalists that I haven't listed or gotten into that are garbage. I mean, James Risen has done article after article at The Intercept falling for Russiagate. And like, it's hilarious when he tries to debate someone about this. He debated Glenn Greenwald once. Glenn was like, look, we have disagreements at The Intercept. Let's have a video debate. So they did a on-the-air video debate, and Greenwald largely tore him apart, and James Risen, despite being a Mr. New York Times, doesn't seem to know what the fuck he's talking about. And
which really just speaks to the fact that the people that are on like the New York Times side of things just accept everything that the State Department says, doesn't dig into it, which is really what makes a fucking journalist, is that you ask questions. Right. You're like, but why is this what you say? I don't think that I'm not seeing the source that matches what you're saying. But when you worked for the New York Times, you're like, yes, sir, absolutely, sir. Whatever you say, sir, I'll print that right now, sir. Thank you, sir.
Well, what's interesting is James Risen got kind of more famous at the New York Times for questioning the State Department on torture. And basically saying that like he had evidence that they were doing it when they saying they weren't or whatever. Yet he uses that resume to then fall for all their future shit. He goes, look, I have a long history of being of questioning the State Department and blah blah blah. But on Russiagate, I'm just gonna fall for whatever they tell me. Like it's crazy. And I happen to, it's 2 years old, but I happen to watch his interview with Aaron Mate where he hangs up on Aaron Mate because Aaron Mate questions him about Russiagate and he can't answer the most basic questions. Like,
yeah, folks, if you ever watching a debate and then someone just leaves the debate, that means that they just lost.
Yeah. If it's legitimate questions, if it's haranguing you.
Well, yeah.
There's that, but, okay, so, yeah, The Intercept has a lot of problems, but I think this speaks to our media, where it stands right now, and the fact that one of the largest, most well-funded outlets that was doing adversarial media, adversarial journalism, is now basically being eroded to, I don't know, it's going to be like Vox or Huffington Post in another week or two.
Yeah, well, I mean, so I was trying to look something up while you were finishing your sentence there, but I was also, what I was thinking about was there are several writers for The Intercept, and I was trying to find their names there, that were around the time of like the Bayou Bridge pipeline and DAPL and things like that. They were doing really amazing work like on environmental issues, specifically like talking about what, I think Intercept, the folks who were writing environmental stuff for The Intercept had shared the information that, for instance, with the Bayou Bridge pipeline, actual law enforcement was moonlighting as security for the pipeline company. So literally they're the same fucking people. And I remember at that time I was like, oh wow, well this is really cool that the Intercept is doing this great work. And then later, looking at the Russiagate shit and just being disgusted by that, and then seeing some other issues with the Intercept, and it highlighting once again the media literacy issue, which is don't just accept something that any outlet says, right? Because there are I've written for outlets too where they've published, I think like around the same time that I wrote this article for Truth Out. Is it Truth Out or Truth Dig? I always get those two confused.
Well, I was a long time columnist for Truth Dig.
Okay, so it was Truth Dig. That I wrote this column about how ridiculous Russiagate is and how it's so clear that it's absolute dog shit.
I recall that was a great column.
Thank you. Like the very same week, as if they had to like cover their tracks or something, they released a column that said like Russiagate is absolutely a thing.
Yeah.
And it was like, what? Why did you? What? No. But it was so. It's again like there are so many outlets, and like even every now and then you'll read The Guardian and you'll be like, hey, that was actually a good article, and then most of the time, like 85% of the time, you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? So it's
The Guardian's been another one that's been heavily eroded.
Oh God, absolutely. Yeah. And Democracy Now, like we've had this conversation too, where it's like you're really gonna go with the white helmets and so it's like,
and they're another one that'll have a interview that's questioning of Russiagate, like a Glenn Greenwald interview, and then they'll have someone else on to buy into all of Russiagate.
Right. And so, it's like having somebody on to talk about climate change and then have somebody on that doesn't agree with the fact that it's happening. And then you're like, well, we're fair and balanced. And you're like, no, you're not. So again, like the issue of media literacy, and this is another one of the videos that I had on my Deception 2020 series, is I had Mickey Huff from Project Censored on to talk about corporate media and propaganda and why media literacy is so important, right? Because it is the lens through which we look at all other issues. So we can't even fucking talk about anything else if you've just been watching Fox, right? Or even if you've just been watching MSNBC, we can't have like a logical conversation about really anything, whether that be racial justice, whether that be climate justice. We can't have an honest conversation because your understanding of the world, I mean, I'm sorry to put this so bluntly, is going to be fucking warped because you're listening to talking heads.
Based on poo-poo.
Can we get a fucking bumper sticker that says that?
Your
reality is based on poo-poo. I want a shirt that says that. I just want swag that says that.
Yes, absolutely.
We're naming this. We're calling this episode "Your Reality is Based on Poo-Poo." But so that's, and I know that we've talked about this before, but it's like it makes more sense in terms of instead of trusting outlets, like trust certain journalists. But even then, don't always assume that they're correct, because I know, and I've done this myself, and I know friends of mine who are journalists that have gotten things wrong before, not because they mean to, unlike like CNN or what have you, but because they accidentally get something wrong.
Yeah.
And then it behooves everyone to fact check that shit. Like the other day, I was looking at an article in a trusted website written by a trusted author, and I noticed that there was just one. It wasn't like a huge issue. It was just like, it was basically like the specific seat that this person had in a specific organization was wrong. And so I just reached out and I was like, hey, just wanted to let you know that this was wrong. Okay, cool. Obviously, that's not going to change like the larger point of the story, but just to say, accidents happen with the best journalists. So check that shit. Propaganda happens with outlets you think that you can trust. Check that shit. Propaganda happens overarchingly like 100% of the time almost in outlets that we don't think you should trust, which is like the corporate media. Yeah. So media literacy is so fucking important, particularly, I mean, it's important now, but particularly in these times when there are issues that literally are dictating whether we will have a fucking future or not. So yeah, whether it's the Intercept or anybody else, like it's really important to question these things. And with regards to Glenn Greenwald's decision to leave. I think, again, like his point about it not being about money, it's like, okay, well then what is the underlying reason here? And let's really look at the outlet. Oh, it's funded by a billionaire. Could that possibly have anything to do with with these issues? And
yeah,
just,
well,
digging a little
funded
bit.
by a billionaire that seemed that he was going to be hands off, and then I assume is not as hands off as it was first believed. But
yeah, I don't know any billionaires that pay for something like an entire media outlet and they're hands off. I mean, this is the same thing that happened with Truthdig, right? Or I don't know if you can get into that.
Yeah, she wasn't. Well, I can tell you what they said publicly. She wasn't a billionaire, but she was a multimillionaire who helped. They called her the publisher, so her role was publisher, and so she funded Truthdig and basically co-founded it with Robert Scheer, a well-known journalist who's really done impressive work over the years, and anyway, great guy, done impressive work, and even evolved. I think he's evolved to understanding the how laughable our two-party system is. Like, used to be probably a Democrat, and then over the years has seen how insane this system is. And anyway, the publisher, I forget her name. The publisher, it seems likely, just didn't like the coverage that Truthdig was doing. Didn't like that they weren't going in for Russiagate. Didn't like a lot of the time. I know you mentioned that there are some competing articles on the site, but didn't like various things that they were doing, which were true, like, and wanted to change the site, and ultimately it just basically said, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home. Like, fuck you. And anyway, I think it's still going through court. I don't know those are the most details I have. I don't have all the details, but, where these funding sources come from is, can be problematic. But yeah, you shouldn't trust a brand or a logo as like, oh, this outlet's always correct or always wrong, or, you definitely have to get deeper than that. You mentioned Democracy Now! Democracy Now! Was pivotal in waking me up and helping me see what was going on in the world. But they've changed it to some extent. I don't watch them enough to know like what percentage. Oh, they're wrong 25% of the time, 50% of the time. I don't know, but I know that they were all in for the kind of U.S. propaganda white helmets thing that was created by UK former military units, and it just has so many problems which they weren't reporting on. They were just basically quoting white helmets every day of the week during the worst of the Syrian bombing, and it didn't really make sense. And it wasn't just me calling this out. Aaron Mate, we mentioned him earlier in the show, but he was a former producer with Democracy Now! Democracy Now! Was pivotal in his career, and he would tweet out like, I don't know what's happening to my former place of work, like.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Question everything. Is that a little too trite?
So in these last couple of minutes, I just wanted to squeeze this in here. We mentioned that Glenn Greenwald, the thing he wanted to write about that was censored was this, was the Hunter Biden story. And, the right wing is trying to act like this is the biggest conspiracy ever. I'll be honest, I have not read up on the details of this latest Hunter Biden left his laptop with emails on it story. But I do know that from everything I've heard, it's standard corruption, but that's not really the point I'm about to make. And standard corruption doesn't mean, oh, don't be mad about it. It means, no, you should. You should call Hunter Biden, the corrupt son of a corrupt lawmaker named Joe Biden. But, is it something where we're like, oh my God, this upends the presidential election? It's like, no,
it didn't add anything groundbreaking
it doesn't seem like it added anything groundbreaking. But that's not my point. My point is, and there's a great episode with Chris Hedges and Matt Taibbi talking about this, that there was a new level of like working together, collusion between big tech social media platforms to completely stop this story from getting out. In a way we haven't seen before. You and I have talked a lot about suppression. We've talked a lot about censorship on these big tech platforms. But this was them all agreeing that they're just not letting this story out, or several of them agreeing. Twitter and Facebook specifically saying, like, you know, if you tried to post something about this story saying, oh, it looks like you're posting a false story, you can't do that, or like whatever the fuck the warning label said, they locked the New York Post, and the New York Post is a garbage outlet, okay? It's like Fox News. However, in this case, it seems they were likely reporting something true. Now, whether they were reporting it biasedly doesn't really matter, because you can be biased. There's no rule on Twitter you can't be biased.
Well, and Twitter had no problem with the other New York Post articles that have been posted over the years that are absolute garbage.
Other dumpster fire articles coming out of the New York Post, utter just diarrhea spraying out like a fire hose, and Twitter has no problem with that. But then it comes to this story, which I have not heard really anyone reputable say that these emails weren't real. Different people attribute different amounts of import to them. But so, you know, reveal this seemingly true story, and they lock the New York Post out of their Twitter account for a week, and they don't let people share it, don't let people talk about it. And there's a great comparison between this story that it wouldn't have occurred to me to make this comparison if it weren't for Matt Taibbi and Chris Hedges in their conversation, but between this story and the New York Times, one of the top podcasts in the country called Caliphate, that was a 6-episode series listened to by millions upon millions. One of the top podcasts in the country, based almost exclusively or largely on the stories, which in the podcast they basically act as if they're true through the whole thing, of this one man. I haven't memorized his name, so I don't have his name for you. But and after the podcast came out, he's a Canadian citizen. He said he joined ISIS. He said he killed people. He said he crucified people, cut off heads. Claimed he did all this stuff himself. There are gory depictions of these things in the podcast, and the Canadian government has arrested him for basically telling false stories about terrorism, lying about creating a hoax, a terrorism hoax.
Which reminds me of, isn't Fox News classified as like entertainment in
I think
Canada?
I think they never went to Canada, because Fox News tried to get into Canada, and they said you'd have to designate yourself entertainment. That's last I heard. Maybe they are in Canada. I don't know.
It just reminded me of that, like Canada hearing some shit that the U.S. is doing, and then Canada being like, and Canada's no like fucking model citizen of the world, but them being like, actually no, that's just fucking bogus. Stop it.
Not true at all. So and everything this guy said was made up. It was all garbage, and the New York Times has not removed the podcast, has not retracted the podcast. The closest you get to a response to the fact that this has come out is them saying, actually, we raised questions about his credibility in the podcast. And apparently, them raising questions is, if like 3 minutes out of 6 episodes, they say, he seems like he's speaking some stuff that's unbelievable. But then they defend it by going, well, no, that can't be, because he would never know A, B, and C. It must be true. So basically, they shoot down the idea that it's not legit. So this is a complete fake news podcast, one of the most listened to in the country, utter horseshit by one of the top, quote-unquote, respected outlets, the New York Times, and none of that is restricted on Twitter. Nope. None of that is restricted on Facebook. Not at all.
By the way, I think, I can't remember because I didn't really follow up on it, but I think I got like some like death threat. And it's not like
a good one, or
I mean, I feel that the wording could have been a bit more creative, but it was something about like calling me like some dumb kike or something like that, and so
that's like a D for creativity.
I agree. Heard it, but then so I blocked them, and I like mentioned it, like said to Twitter like, hey, this is like threatening or whatever, and apparently this person was their Twitter account was not like canceled, because I saw them come back like a month or so later, but I think they were banned for like a week. So people who send death threats to people get banned from Twitter for roughly a week. People who post things that are, as far as we can see, true, but that might be slightly embarrassing to one of the presidential candidates get also banned for a week. And it's, I mean, like, and again, like, nobody gave a flying fuck about the fact that the New York Post was posting absolute dog shit articles before this that are, like, easily identifiably untrue. Nobody had any problem with that.
Something about Bill Clinton raped an alien and then it lived
I
inside
thought
of...
the alien raped Bill Clinton.
That actually explains a lot.
Anyway, it's just absolutely. I mean, on one hand, it's funny because, you know, as a friend of mine once said, there's so much to cry about. Sometimes you just have to laugh, but it really is very worrying and concerning because just like with what happened with Alex Jones, when all the liberals were like, yay, Alex Jones is banned, and then all of a sudden, like, a bunch of leftist media outlets are also taken off of Facebook and Twitter, it doesn't stop there. They're not just gonna, like, take away the stories that you find annoying or that you find offensive. This is how censorship works. It is a blanket that can be thrown over anybody at any time and disappear. Like, it is the same excuse that will be used to ban us or that will be used to ban people like us. And so this kind of censorship is incredibly concerning.
And this is exactly what I tried to say under Obama, which was, you know, when surveillance was becoming was being revealed, and when you know, they were passing things like the Patriot Act and stuff like that. I said, okay, you may like the president in power right now. Let's say you do. This power, this toolkit is still going to be there for the next guy you fucking don't like. And so then Trump gets in there, and all the liberals who love these powers for the president are like, oh, Trump's doing these things. And it's like, yeah, you fucking asshole. You gave the president a dictator's toolkit, and then you're surprised when the guy you don't like has it. Like, that's how the fucking system works. And so exactly when Alex Jones was purged from all the outlets, I was, from all the platforms, I was like, okay, I fucking hate Alex Jones. I've made fun of him endlessly. He's a fucking awful stooge, awful human being, disgusting, just honestly, just flesh bag of dog diarrhea. And at the same time, I was like, well, who will this be used on next? And then we started to see, Free Thought Project, Police the Police, antimedia.com, antiwar.com, just slowly being purged, knocked away, wiped out, suppressed. And of course, my stuff and your stuff's heavily suppressed. We haven't been deleted yet. But it's like, how can you not understand where this goes next? But for all the shiny liberals who think MSNBC has it all right, then it's all fine, right? Okay, who cares if it's... it's just disgusting.
Indeed it is, which circles us back to that first point, which is, what's happening tomorrow, this quote-unquote election, is the pile of shit in the middle of the prison cell, but it is not the prison cell, and we should focus more of our efforts on the prison cell at hand.
That being said, you should still vote because there's a lot of things on there other than just the presidency. There's a lot of important issues, and you should not be that thrilled that you voted because it's not that big a deal. It's like putting on your shoes before you leave the apartment so your feet won't hurt. You should go vote. I always keep saying that because here's the thing, and some people like to say like, oh, this shit show's not going to end until all of us boycott voting. It's like, you're never going to get that, and so therefore the corporatocracy, the corporate rulers, the ruling elite, the oligarchy would love nothing more than for as few of you to give a shit as possible.
Well, voting does not equal give a shit.
Well, but I would argue that, okay, but...
We can have this conversation tomorrow, kids.
Yeah, let's have this conversation tomorrow. We're wrapping up here. We're going to do, we're headed over to patreon.com/common censor to do 10 to 15 more minutes. Patreon.com/common censor. Also, 7:30 p.m. tomorrow night, Tuesday. Eastern. I thought you were yelling Easter. And I was like, oh, that's not yet, but I'm glad you're excited. Getting excited early.
I want chocolate egg.
7:30 p.m. Eastern for at least an hour. That's at youtube.com/moment of clarity. Go over there, hit subscribe, hit the bell icon. You can do that now if you want, and write it in your calendar. 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Join us for a live stream where we will be answering your questions and comments and talking about what the fuck has been going down in the election. All right. Keep fighting, boys and girls.
And non-binaries.
And non-binaries.
Act out.
Keep fighting.